I'm Insomniac, and this is the Islander ISL-79.
Who are you?
Insomniac.
Okay, before we dive into this one, big shout out to Patrick for sending this in. I've actually been curious about the Islander watches since they've come out, so I wanted to spend some time with something here and see what they're all about, so much appreciated. Anybody watching this who has any cool watches you'd like to see reviewed here on Should I Time This, email me at shoulditimethis@gmail.com. I will let you know where to send the watches. They'll be reviewed, insured, and sent back. And make sure to you subscribe and hit the notification bell and like button and all of that YouTube stuff. It would be very much appreciated. And that's it. Let's get right into the watch. The case on this watch has some nice features, feels solid, and looks pretty good. It's a rounded square, if you will, cushion style case with clean curves around the edges of the case sides. The top and back of the case are both brushed, and the brushing is uniformed and looks pretty good. The sides of the case are polished, which is the one and only thing I don't like here. Not because they're polished, but because this is one of the most fingerprint attracting polished surfaces I've ever come across. I found myself needing to wipe the sides of this case off every time I looked at it. Case back is a screw down type with an engraving of Long Island on it, because for those of you who didn't know, these Islander watches are basically the house brand of watches for LongIslandWatch.com. The Islander watch logo that you see on the dial and the crown are actually the LongIslandWatch.com logo from the website. A quick look at the lugs reveals a couple cool tricks. First, you'll notice that the ends are drilled to make changing out the bracelet easier. Second, the lugs are short and curve abruptly, which is great being that the watch is 42 millimeters in diameter. These smaller lugs mean a slightly smaller footprint on the wrist. The bezel on this watch is a 120 click unidirectional bezel with a coin edge type grip, which, although not all that grippy, is actually very easy to turn and seems to stay in place well wherever you set it without much play or slop in the mechanism at all. It's also worth mentioning that the bezel insert is ceramic and the markers are done in Superluminova, so the bezel should be both durable and practical. Last but not least, we have the crown. It's nice and large, although not too large for this piece. It has the Island Watch logo engraved into it. It has good grip for winding or setting the watch, and it's a screw down type to aid with water resistance. Overall, it's a well thought out case. Under the anti-reflective coated sapphire crystal, you have an interesting dial. I've seen a lot of sunburst dials and I've seen a lot of sandwich dials, but it's not too often that I come across a sunburst sandwich dial. The lower level is made of Superluminova, while the top section with the cutouts for the hour markers and numerals is a blue-green kind of teal color, finished with a nice sunburst effect that really plays with the light and gives you everything from hues of light greens and blues down to deep navy blues that sometimes look almost black, so it's an attractive dial surface for sure. The outermost edge of the dial has a steeply angled chapter ring with white line markers for your minute track, while on the main dial you obviously have the cutouts that I mentioned earlier for your hours, as well as an Island Watch logo under the 12 and automatic 200 meters above the 6. Last but not least, you have the hands, which I found to be mostly good. Your hour and minute hands are thick and chunky, but that big, bold, blunt style actually works well on this simple dial with the large stencil style cutouts, and I like the fact that the hour hand is significantly shorter and fatter to help you quickly distinguish one hand from another, which often comes in handy in low light situations or during a dive. The polished finishing of these hands is also well done. Here are my two small complaints with the handset. One, the minute hand is too short. Not only is it significantly shorter than the second hand, but the only minute track you have is out on that chapter ring, so it would be useful to have the minute hand get as close to that minute track as possible. And two, the thing that houses the Lume red dot on the second hand, you can call it whatever you want, but that's a soda can tab. And what is the red dot for? It doesn't match anything on the dial or the whole watch for that matter. They would have been better off just going with a Lume-filled circle here rather than this two-colored soda can popper thing. Overall though, it's a nice, uncluttered dial. Basically everything on this dial and bezel, minus the minute track, is filled with C3 Superluminova. It picks up a charge fairly easily, everything glows bright and uniformed, and it lasts pretty long. So it's good lume, and it's everywhere you would want it to be on a dive style tool watch. Very nice. Time at a glance on this watch is very good. There's no clutter on the dial, the polished hands and Lume field markers contrast well against the blue-green backdrop, and all three hands have definitive points at the tips. My only issue is what I brought up earlier regarding the length of the minute hand. You can definitely tell where it's pointing, but there's a sizable gap between the tip of the minute hand and the minute track, which is set on the chapter ring at a steep angle, so sometimes you do have to look closely to tell the time accurately to the minute. Overall though, it's easy to get a quick read of the time at a glance. The bracelet on this watch works well with the case. It's what they call a beads of rice style stainless steel bracelet, done in an alternate mix of brushed and polished finishes with a plain but structurally sound double locking deployant clasp. That clasp does feature fine adjusters for making size adjustments without needing to add or remove links when only needing to adjust the size by a small amount for a perfect fit. I found the bracelet to be fairly comfortable throughout the day. It balanced well with the fairly heavy watch body and looked the part aesthetically with the watch as a whole. The only thing I wasn't a fan of with this bracelet was the fact that they used screws here instead of standard pins to keep the links together. Anybody who has ever added or subtracted links in a bracelet knows that screw pins are easier to remove than traditional pins, but it's much easier to lose those tiny screws and a bit of a chore to line them up to re-secure the links after reinsertion if you don't lose them. Overall though, it's a good bracelet for this watch. Last but not least, we have value, which was definitely the hardest part of this review for me to score. As of the time of this video, Island Watch is selling these for $2.99 with a list price of $3.99. This is one of those scenarios where you really have to ask yourself if you're shopping for brand and aesthetic or if you're shopping for features. Now, in terms of aesthetics, this watch is right in the middle for me. It's a handsome piece, but I didn't find anything necessarily really unique or eye-catching about this watch in general, minus maybe the interesting color of the sunburst cutout dial. In terms of features, it has a lot of well thought out features, including a sapphire crystal, a ceramic bezel, good lume, a solid water resistance rating, and a workhorse Seiko automatic movement. So all of that in a fairly handsome, seemingly well-made piece for only $2.99 is a fair price for sure. But on the other side of the argument, Island Watch is the watch world equivalent of buying the store brand. It's not a piece that really anybody's gonna recognize. It's not a watch that's probably ever going to increase in value. And not unlike what many store brands, the actual brand here is actually advertising a retail store more than it is emphasizing a brand. Like I mentioned earlier, the actual logo on the dial, on the crown, it's literally the LongIslandWatch.com logo. So in a very superficial way, it kind of feels like buying a generic version of something, but without the generic version price tag. Because there are known name brand watches out there with similar features, similar aesthetic, dive style watches all over the place for similar money. So basically, if you love the aesthetic of this watch and it has all of the features that you want, I actually think it's a very good value at $2.99. If you're looking for a bit of heritage and brand DNA in addition to those features, then I actually think $2.99 is pretty damn steep for a watch that literally has a retail website's logo on the dial. So yeah, I'm glad I got to take a look at one of these. I've been seeing them around on the internet for a while now, so it was nice to be able to spend some time with it and see what it's all about. Another big shout out to Patrick. Thank you very much for sending this in. He actually sent another watch in, which I will be posting a review on very shortly, so stick around for that. So that's it. Make sure you're subscribed. I have a lot of new watch reviews coming soon.